Hi, so for this edition of Film Recommendations, I'm going to be talking just about one particular franchise, and that is the Robocop franchise. Now, this is one that's kind of gone hit or miss very much over the last, goodness, about 23 years, um, 23, 24 years or so. It was one of the last big special effects sci-fi movies to come out of the 1980s, um, and really it had a look and feel that was very uniquely 80s, and yet um, if you watch it, it's so crisp and sharp that it looks like it could have been made in the 90s and everything. It mostly uses aside from practical effects, which is like people in suits, it mostly uses stop motion animation, blue screen, and that sort of stuff. And it uses it very seamlessly, actually, so that you're really immersed in this world. There's also a good deal of political commentary that runs throughout the series. Um, and Anyway, we'll get right into it. The first film, Robocop, came out in 1987 and starred Peter Weller. And in the second one, he only made a couple of brief cameos, um, but pretty much after that, Peter Weller didn't want to have too much more involvement in it because he wanted to kind of move on with his career. Um, of course, he also made Buckaroo Banzai, so who's to judge? Anyway, Uh, and in that story, it's basically about a good cop who gets shot down in the line of duty, and he, uh, in a future Detroit that is basically run by gangs that deal drugs and everything. And it's really an exciting storyline. Um, and really, I think that it's held up as a movie. It has a great deal of commentary, a great deal of fun and action. It also is very gory and violent, so do not watch it with the kids. It tends to be categorized as kiddie fare because of the sci-fi element about it and the hero-villain dynamic, but it is very gory and violent, so do not watch it with the kids. They will have nightmares. Just don't do it. Um, Now, I think that it had a good ending. It really went well for just a solo movie, which it was kind of originally planned as. It wasn't really planned to become a franchise, but it ended up doing so well that the flagging Orion Pictures Studios actually ended up being able to make more movies thanks to the capital it received from the Robocop franchise and all the merchandising. Uh, there were cartoons and comic books and everything, toys, of course. So moving on, you go to RoboCop 2, which was directed by Irving Kershner, whom some of you know also directed the second Star Wars movie, and evidently had some hand in writing and directing the third Star Wars prequel. Now, of course, we know that a lot of his touches as a storyteller really lent a lot of good stuff to Empire Strikes Back. And this is also very true with RoboCop 2. With RoboCop 2, you are put down right in the middle of the action. Um, the character of Alex Murphy's former partner is right there in the middle of things. RoboCop is off somewhere else. You're kind of waiting for him to come out. Um, they do a lot of really good stuff in terms of storytelling elements with simple one-take shots that require a good bit of orchestration and timing, but end up being executed nearly flawlessly. The story takes a couple of different directions from one point in the storytelling to another, and I think this was partially because the producers just kept coming in and saying, "Put this in, put this in, put this in." They're also, I think that also the writing might have changed hands a little bit at some point, which tends to happen. Unfortunately, by this time, Orion was really, just about washed up. So, what are you really going to do? But then Orion spent years bouncing back and forth between bankruptcy and success with big budget special effects films. Anyway, so Robocop 2 takes a darker turn by having uh, the OCP company become very much more of a fascist corporate element run by um, run by the kindly old CEO, and is really kind of interesting just as a continuing story. Uh, it takes lots of little segues through the story to tell all kinds of little side stories, with a lot of the plots coming together in the end. Um, there is a great deal of darkness, but also incredible acting in this in the sequel. Now, RoboCop 3, you have some good actors, um, and unfortunately, the writing and the particularly the direction tend to suck. The direction, especially. Um, RoboCop takes on a very strange, cartoony role where, like, almost every half hour or so, they do a tight zoom on him and he says some kind of cheesy action line, some kind of pun or something. Um, so uh, they keep doing this throughout the film and it doesn't end well. And they kind of kept billing that RoboCop was going to have a jetpack in it. Um, it was in the previews and it was in. Um, they alluded to it right at the beginning of the film, pretty much. It's just not a very good movie. Um, it there are some indications where the director comes through and kind of puts a darker tone on it by kind of having OCP interfere with RoboCop's programming by putting a bunch of garbage directives installed into him, and so that really uh, is an interesting twist on it. Uh, so RoboCop 3 ends up becoming um, kind of a parody of itself by the end, and I blame that a lot on the fact that they seem to the studio really seemed to be pushing it as a film for families and kids and things instead of being a serious action sci-fi adventure more for grown-ups. Uh, they turned down the gore a little bit. Um, they kind of pushed the role of children in the storytelling element, and they introduced some weird stuff with a Japanese company buying out OCP, um, and so it kind of, yeah, it just takes on a really weird tone. Um, if you really want to see it, go ahead. Uh, Nothing's stopping you. They're all available on Netflix to watch, and yeah, so you can check those out. Um, they're fun, they're action packed, they're not for kids. They're more for adults, teenagers, 20 somethings, and there is a lot of gore, so you should be prepared for that. Um, there's a lot of violence in it. Um, as it is, it's a good storyline for the first two movies, and I think you'll agree that if you watch the third one, you'll definitely get a lot of that. They picked a good director. Um, the original story writer didn't have as much to do with that. Now, in the next half of this episode, I will pick up and discuss some of the more recent sequels to the franchise. That'll be coming up in part two.